Hello. To
Hello.
start with, I would like to ask what's your name and where you are at the moment.
My name is Sean Murphy. I'm a psychotherapist. I work in Essex in England. And right now I'm in an office in my garden watching the sunset just behind you.
You are seeing the sunset. Can you tell us more?
Yeah. I'm not sure what I'd say other than it's beautiful. So we inherited a beautiful garden when we moved in by someone who really knew what they were doing. And again, a beautiful mistake is that we didn't know was going to happen. The sun sets behind the garden across fields, goes down behind the trees and turns the whole garden orange and ochre and yellow, this beautiful light. And we have a cloudless sky this evening. So as we're talking, that's becoming a deeper yellow and orange.
Wow, so that's the field of tonight. That's really nice.
That's the field. That's a very strong visual element in our field, yeah.
Okay, and actually I want to ask you, even before we go further, to tell us more like online about the pictures behind you and what attracts you to them.
Well, okay, so I think I'm quite a visual person, and I love, as you could guess from my description of the sunset, I love color. And I kind of wanted an environment that surrounded me, which was not too much in terms of my biography or, you know, memoirs or anything, but just says something about me quietly. So I like color. So I've got Franz Marc is a German expressionist of the postcards. That isn't Franz Marc. That is someone who does colors similarly to Franz Marc. And I'm not sure if you can see because of the reflection, I have a friend who's an artist, and that little red blob in there is a three-dimensional, well, between 2 and 3-dimensional felt heart.
Oh, wow.
So it's an actual heart with all the, you know, made of felt. So that's some of the liveliness and art that I wanted to bring into my background.
And is art something that you feel strongly connected to?
I'd love to say yes, but I forget that it's there, if that makes sense.
And do you create yourself?
I've just started to. I've had an odd relationship with creativity, really. I've never really treated myself as a creative person. And somehow I gave up the idea of myself as an artist as a teenager, which I think is quite common. I used to write poetry and do those kinds of things. And then I started doing a more normal, non-creative life. And so it's never occurred to me to think of myself as a creative thinker or as a creative artist. But about 18 months ago, I got rather bored of listening to myself make excuses about creativity. So I've started learning the piano, which you can't see, which is over there. So I'm not at the creative point of piano playing yet, but that's my purpose. I want to sit down and create some new combination of notes, which Sean Murphy has made rather than somebody else. So I guess that's my quick answer, is I'm not really creative, but I think that's possibly because I've not given myself the permission to be.
I'm curious, actually, it's not part of the interview, questions, but how creative do you take therapy to be?
I think it's almost infinitely creative, because every meeting of 2 or more people is infinitely creative and is full of potential. I'm not sure I'm the best practitioner of it, because there's a part of my brain which is possibly quite left-oriented, that likes process, structure, linear thinking. And so I'm very swayed by that. But in the times when I just remember to turn that off and allow something more exciting and new to emerge in the therapeutic relationship, I often find, oh, that's really rather lovely. That's nice. I didn't plan that, and that's good. And then, as you know, people like Paul Goodman and Fritz Perls promised would happen, when you allow that creative dimension to live through you, then life becomes exciting in a new way, in a real way. So I guess I'd like to be more creative. When I allow myself to be, it's really rather exciting. It feels like I'm constantly fighting a more rigid Gestalt that feels safer.
So actually, you've said some things about you, but who are you in addition to what you already mentioned as a person?
Well, that's a huge question. Who am I? Well, what I do as well as therapy, I mean, I laughingly call it a portfolio career, but it's a collection of activities involving learning, I guess. So I've got what's called a main job, I guess, which is I train, I facilitate meetings, and I coach. So something like a trainer and a management consultant. And I do that for charities and government, not for profit organizations. And I'm a kind of therapist, inverted commas, on the side a little bit. And what I find with my attention span is that I really like that mixture. So today I have trained, today I have coached, I have a therapy client. I've had a therapy client between finishing that and talking to you. And I find that these are, at their best, really complementary activities involving learning and understanding and making sense making and insight, hopefully. And I find that that's just as joyous with a national charity to try and do that as it is with one person who's trying to sort out who they are or how to live differently. So I do those four things, and they tend to blend quite nicely so far.
And out of curiosity, how do they inform each other, or how do they work with each other?
I had a feeling you might ask me that, and so I've been practicing a really good answer. Though I'm not sure it's the right one. I think it's a good answer for an interview. They inform each other, I guess, in very unconscious ways. I don't think, and that's partly the reason why I haven't done, for example, a Gestalt masters in working with businesses or consultants, because I think it would become more conscious. But I live gestaltly, to invent an adverb. So I don't think, I will now borrow a concept of polarities for the purpose of this coaching conversation. I don't think it's time to think about a performance development policy through the lens of field theory. I don't think about, and I'm not sure you can. But I find myself trying things out which don't necessarily belong in the box I'm working in. So I often find this is a debate I have with my supervisor, because I don't know whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent. I just know that sometimes when it works, it's great. Is that I can be quite a coaching therapist. And by that, I mean a greater emphasis on goals and action rather than exploration or sitting with. So I can borrow some of the rule book from coaching about, well, okay, so what does that tell you? What are you going to do? And I don't allow those big pauses and those spaces for much fertile void, because when you're a coach, there's not much fertile void. You have to get people, 60-minute session, making the difference that's paid for by their employer quite a lot of the time. I don't think I've been particularly successful at introducing some of the weirder, wackier, more therapeutic stuff into my own work. And I think there's various reasons for that. One of the reasons that sticks in my mind in my semi-rehearsed answer that I might have for you for this question is a time when I was facilitating a team development day for a national charity of about 25 people. And I do subscribe to the idea that it's in the working out of the problem that teams happen. Teamwork is a phenomenon, it's a field arrangement. And certain configurations of the field make the bond and the purpose and the aspiration and the hope, and it goes ping, oh wow, we're a team and we're really cooking. And so I often follow quite predictable and well-worn team development theories to do that. And on one day they were really struggling with a problem, and I thought, if I was a team facilitator, I'd be making some suggestions. Why don't you try this? Why don't you try that? Perhaps we should. I thought, I'm going to be more therapist about this, and I'm going to sit back while frustration brews and while the tension, I forget how Pearl's described it, but it's something about the point at which you realize that what you've always done doesn't work anymore. Oh yeah, that blaming people for who I am, that doesn't work, and I hate that. That wonderful feeling, that painful turbulence that precedes, oh yeah, that lovely bit, which is very hard to hold on to if you're a bit of a people pleaser, as I can be. And so I thought I'd do that and just leave them to suffer for half an hour without resolution or problem or the paternal guide to jump in and make things okay. And I thought, wow, I'm so amazing. I'm so special. Look at me employing multiple disciplines here. I'm absolutely incredible. And actually, it went down extremely badly, and evaluations were all quite condemning of the fact that I was too passive. I didn't step in. I didn't resolve the difficulty and I should have been, making suggestions, making things happen. And I thought that's interesting because it was one of the few times when I borrowed some of that therapeutic distance and refusal to be top dog, the great helper, the great guru who steps in and provides, which is what I love doing. I find that ego terms very satisfying, so I do that quite a lot in that domain. But okay, if I didn't do that, what would happen? And I've done it that a few times, and it's been met very negatively so far. So I'm not, in terms of my income, I'm not super encouraged to try any more of that. And maybe that's more about the mandate that you have in different domains. If you mix domains, you mix the facilitation and the coaching and the therapy and I think there are different expectations and maybe a different field, which is configured differently when you're with 24 colleagues as opposed to on your own for something called therapy. So that's my long rambling answer, but I don't do it particularly well. When I've done it sometimes, it's gone, wow, why don't I do this more often? But equally, it's gone clunk as I have mixed things that aren't ready to emerge yet.
So in itself, it's an experiment.
I guess so. And I'm part of the experiment. I'm in the field. And, when people look at you, if you're the facilitator or the coach, they kind of want some answers. And so it's to be creative and yet not resolve for people, I think is an endless challenge.
Yeah. And through all of this, what do you think are some of your values and how do you hold them in all those processes?
Wow, that's a challenging and difficult question. What are my values? Off the top of my head, I think I'd say, if in doubt, say something. And make that something true. And test how risky you can be. Why that value? Because I've just found it useful, probably in all of the domains that I've just mentioned, actually. So I don't know what to say now, and I get the feeling that you don't know what to say. And this feels like a really difficult place to be in, where I'm not sure, and I'm telling myself I'm incompetent and this is hopeless. What are you telling yourself? And that's quite a risky thing to say for someone who's supposed to, for a certain amount of money per session, come up with something useful. So I think, if in doubt, say something true, and test how risky that is. Just step a few centimeters beyond comfort, and don't say the wise thing. Say the risky thing. Say the thing which is on the borders of vulnerability, even if it doesn't step into vulnerability. I guess I've got that as a value. I'm not sure if it's a value or a guiding principle, but I think therapy can be quite esoteric. And it has a long theory, which is quite akin to the Catholic Church in a way, in terms of there's a dogma, there's a Latin script, and you may or may not be party to that or speak that language. And I will sit here in a three-piece suit and give you the meaning of what's happening to you. And obviously that's a very dated 100-year-old model. But what I find again and again is clients don't know how things work. And if you look at them, they think you're staring because you're bored. And if you look at them, then you're judging them. And they don't know when I say, well, should we try an experiment? You're doing something really useful rather than wasting time. So there's a whole body of expectations that we bring to therapy after having trained in it for a long time, where you think everyone knows this. Everyone knows what a silence is. It's a fertile void. Everyone knows what, me saying, well, that's a question, but is it really a statement? Make that a statement. But that's not what people do in conversations. What are you doing there? So I guess I try and explain, this is not quite the phrase I want, but explain the rules, explain some of the differences of how this looks and feels like a conversation that you have every day, but it's not, because it's got different configurations, it's got different expectations and outputs. It has a different depth. And I guess one of my values is don't leave people hanging on trying to guess what the therapy is about, is welcome them into a space where you don't have to be, what's the technical phrase, emotionally continent, where you're inscrutable and impassive and they have to work out how things work. I don't find that helpful to most people. I think it speaks of a kind of professional arrogance on our part that we expect people to catch up. Yeah. And I'm searching around for more values. I guess one, and I told you about my challenges with it, is try something else, try something new. Have a go at that. What you think should happen now, do the opposite. How this normally works, try that. And I guess folded into that, a value might be, and I struggle with this still, and I guess I always will, is this is a creative process that doesn't need your set of judgments sitting on your shoulder, but that was a good intervention, or that was well handled, or was that an accurate summary, or are you talking too much about yourself, or are you not saying enough about yourself, and all that kind of what's wrong with you dialogue. So I try and move away from that as much as possible as a value, to try and really connect, because I think ultimately what the healing process is about is the level of connection and the level of acceptable relationship that there can be between people, given what people can tolerate. So I've got some values around that. I'm not sure they're very worked out, and I guess if you interviewed me in a year's time, I might have a more polished answer. But I think I'm hoping that bringing myself as fully as possible to the party in whatever I'm doing is my central value. I don't have a huge set of tools or techniques. I'm often lost. But I think if I bring myself authentically to what's going on, something will happen. And I guess that's probably my number one value. Something will happen, and me and the field and you in the field will create something out of that. And it may be pleasant or beautiful or wonderful or shocking or depressing or all of those things, but what will happen, and there will be resources to handle it when it does.
Lovely. That is lovely to hear. And then what do you think are some events or set of circumstances that impacted who you are? And obviously everything impacts who we are, so I don't expect to tell your whole life story, but if there is something that has gravity.
I'll offer two instead of the full autobiography, I guess. One was, and I guess this is true, I mean, I haven't done much research on this, but I guess all therapists are wounded and have scars and tender places and bruises and maybe missing parts. And I'm absolutely no different in that. I didn't have a happy childhood, and I haven't met a therapist who did in some way, whatever a happy childhood would be. And so, like many people who felt disconnected and hollow and underloved, I guess I had a real yearning and a real thirst, a real hunger to find out how feeling substantial and whole would be.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, if that makes sense. What I have a vision of a different Sean, age 20, where I don't feel that I might collapse internally if someone says something. I don't feel that I'm tiny and squeezed and boxed and alien and different and undernourished and all those kinds of things. And there's multiple examples of that, but I guess that's how I left my teenage years, but with a sense of I have a lot of work to do. And I'm hungry for it, but I don't know what to do with it. I mean, do I become an adventurer? Do I become a writer? How do I make that wholeness and that way of living that might be beautiful, that might be substantial and centered and rich, whatever that might mean. I have no role models. I'm not sure what it looks like. I don't know if it's something that's attainable, but I know that I'm wounded, and I know that I'm not whole, and I know that there are parts missing. And I have a sense, I have an intuition that there's another version of me down the road, which might be something different. So all of those sets of experiences probably made me pick up the book that's behind me, The Pearls, Hefferline and Goodman, which from 1992 when I picked up first. And when I started first doing experiments about eating until it's all like baby food and all those kinds of things. And the second example I'll offer is that sense of, well, I'm certainly interested in being different and growth, whatever that might mean. I don't know anyone who's doing this thing, but it sounds groovy. I'm up for that growth thing. That sounds like a noble and spiritual path, even though I'm not sure what either of those words mean. And I was talking to someone that I met at a swimming pool when I was teaching English in Spain. And I realized that she was telling me her whole life as we were sitting there with our feet in the water. And I said, "You're telling me a lot about yourself." And she said two things. First is, yeah, I can't stop talking to you about myself. And I thought, well, that's interesting. Maybe unlike every other member of my family, maybe I'm someone to whom people feel, okay, I could give you. You know, I don't need to take up the space, and you can give me something and that can be held by me. Lovely, maybe I'm that type of person. And the second thing was a bit more complicated, because she said something like, she mentioned her relationship with her boyfriend and her unsatisfying sex life and stuff. And I said, out of the blue, and it's not that bothers you. It's not the fact that you have an unsatisfying sex life. It's the fact that you are prepared to put up with that because you don't think you could do better. Is that right? And she slapped my face.
Oh, wow.
She said, how could you, I mean, feel that thwack. And she was absolutely right to do so. There was an absolute invasion of her privacy as she experienced it. And I think she was right. I deserved that whack. But I also thought that was bang on the money. And she said, who told you that? How do you know that? And no one knows that. And so that conversation became like a template for me of maybe I'm someone that could listen and understand and hold people's conversation. And maybe, you know, I've got a moderate and modest gift for being able to understand a deeper level that's being spoken. Maybe that's something I could do. And then I left Spain and came home to London and started on a course and started my therapy all within about a year of that. So that was a pivotal time for me. I thought, well, maybe I'm not so rubbish as I thought, and maybe I have something to offer to someone. And I don't have that person's email, but I think I'd like to email them and say thank you, because that boundary modification that you offered me, so physically and instinctively, that was exactly the thing you should have done. That was absolutely me overstepping that boundary as I can. But thank you for that slap, because that showed me that I can look into and understand what's going on. And I guess a bit that I learned in my receiving therapy is that I can also stand being looked into, which is the bit I don't think I could do at that time. I could peer in a bit, but the idea of someone looking into me felt unbearable. And I guess that's one of the most important things that therapists can do, really, is to have some peace about being seen. If that makes sense.
It definitely does. I must say, this is the most interesting. How did you come into the Gestalt psychotherapy story I've heard so far?
I saw a leaflet in a somewhere, and I saw it online, and I applied for a course. I don't know, but that's my story.
Yeah. And then, what are the people that impacted you? You mentioned this. It was a lady, no?
Yeah.
That slapped you. But then, what are other people that somehow impacted you in your life until now?
Well, I get all of my tutors in various different ways, and you know, in good, bad, and in different ways. Some of the therapists I've had 5 different therapists, I guess, over the last 25 years. And I'm very greedy to copy and paste what works. When I see something, a style, an element, a graceful maneuver, a sense of something happening that's really rather beautiful, I go, I'm having that. I'm not sure if it corresponds to the Pearlsy idea of I'm going to bite that and chew on it. It feels more instinctive than that. It just feels like I'm putting that in mind. But that beautiful and graceful thing that you just did there in the group, I love that. I want to be that person that can do that. I'm going to have a go at that. And of course, when you do have a go at that, it's all rather clumsy and it's out of sync with the field timing and pace and stuff. But I guess that's how you become good at anything. So I could probably name all of my tutors in various different ways. And that's a bit of a mixed blessing I've found, because when I've met people that have impacted me, whether they're kind of authors or I've seen them on different sessions or been taught by them, it's very hard not to have them installed here as judges on how well I'm doing that copy and paste. So I found that a really difficult thing to navigate, and I'm still in that difficulty of, oh, wow, this is a beautiful thing to say. That's so connecting and wise and calm. I love it. I want to eat that. I want to bite that and have that. I want to be that. And yet I don't seem to be able to do that and then make it me, because they sit there and go, was that timing? Is that too much about you, Sean? And so I don't know how to do that. But I guess the answer is, well, who doesn't impact you in some way?
Yeah.
What client, particularly, clients that have just gone clunk from day one. You think, well, I don't know what's happening here, but it's my job to find out and understand what's going on if I can. Or some clients who make you believe in yourself in a beautiful way. You think, I'm not bad at this. Maybe this is okay. Maybe I'm offering something fruitful. So I think I'm very open to be impacted upon, but sometimes that's a mixed blessing.
Yeah. And I'm curious, in terms of your development as a therapist, you are mentioning all the doubts. What helped you to hold the doubts and still persist?
Well, there's a great question. I want to be facetious and say I've invested so much money and time. I've got to just do it, whatever the doubts. So that will be the facetious, but also partly true answer. I think once you do go through so many hoops and so many assessments and judgments, you kind of think, I'm in this now. And good, bad, or different, I'm in the game. So crack on. I guess there comes a point when you transform but into and. And by that I mean, so like with a client today, I said something, I thought, why am I saying that? I'm just filling up space. I'm just saying something, I'm trying to sound a bit clever as well. One of my advices. I haven't really listened, I'm just waiting for my opportunity to say something clever. Oh, so that means I'm not really a good therapist. But that means I'm rubbish, or something like that, or something negative and deflating and disrespectful. And now what I've got is something else, I guess, over time. It fluctuates according to multiple aspects of the field, I guess. But I think, oh, that wasn't particularly helpful, and you're okay.
Yeah.
and you want to be clever. So what, maybe this person does too. Maybe you're fencing with cleverness. And maybe that's interesting, maybe that's fine. And I guess to answer your previous question, and this one, if I may, we had a weekend of a clown therapist who trained to be a clown and had become a therapist. And he blew my mind because he gave a special kind of permission to get it wrong as often as you like. Have a go, doesn't work, try something else. Custard pie, no laughs, do the horn. Horn, no laughs, fall over. People laugh, fall over again. People laugh, fall over again. Fall over again, they don't laugh, do something else. In this creative, evolving, dynamic process. So rather than disable yourself with a judgment of, oh, is that it? Or no, or oh, or come on, or any of those things which accompany the process. You know, I think, yeah, I've got that going on, and this is all right, and things are emerging, and I might say something about that, and it's fine. I'm a therapist. Okay, I'm doing something here. And it may not be fantastic, and it may not be, you know, video standard, and no one's going to be downloading this off Pessy UK as, you know, absolutely beautiful example of how to do this, but it's honest and it's good enough. And I guess I have some of that over the years that have crept in.
Yeah, and I'm curious, how much of that permission can you give yourself then when you transfer into people that review you and tell you, oh, you didn't step in enough, or how much of that you can say yes and
well, I don't know if you can, and certainly I had my difficulties and doubts and tribulations with the whole therapeutic education process. I found it enormously frustrating and vexing in multiple ways because of that. It was, you know, I don't think it was mixed messages, but it was partly, you know, be free, experiment, but don't do that.
Yeah.
Play, sit in the fertile void, but for not too long. Share your vulnerability, but it's not about you. And so there seem to be these contradictory and sometimes clashing messages, and it felt a bit like, indeed, as my supervisor tells me every time, that was just your driving license. Play the driving license game, look in the wing mirrors, slow down, do 10 to 2 or 20 to 4. And that's what, so after that, then you can play free jazz. But right now, they want you to read 4/4 time, and they want you to play Scarborough Fair. And that's what they want to hear before they let you loose on people. And so they don't want Ornette Coleman, they don't want free jazz, they don't want bebop. So, okay, that's how it needs to work in order to have any kind of consistency across populations across the world in this type of level. So I kind of swallowed that eventually. Okay, well, I've been told do more but do less simultaneously, speak up but be quiet, experiment but play it safe, etc., etc. And it feels like a set of recipes which are going to make a terrible goulash. But somehow I've got to, you know, do my best and hit the ducks as they go past, in all of you to say, okay, well, it's fine.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure it's resolvable, and I don't know anyone. I know a few people who've sailed through 5 or 6 years, and they just seem to have the knack of being themselves and be examined at the same time without any friction. But I think most of us have a bit of a tormented, maybe teenage and parent relationship with the school that made us. You know, almost everyone I know still has. I mean, the therapist colleagues that I meet up with regularly, you know, we still joke about, you know, the time when that tutor did this and that, and they mix their messages and were totally unfair, and how totally unreasonable things are. And maybe that's just, you know, maybe you have to be a therapist for 20 years and you just, or maybe become a tutor yourself. And you leave that behind. But I'm not sure it's resolvable. You know, it's be free, be loose, be yourself, but don't.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly my experience.
Not that way, this way.
Yeah.
Is that your experience at the moment? Is that something you're wrestling with?
Yes, I guess it's a lot of like, you can't go to pee, for example, because and then it's like, well, how do we then teach anyone in therapy that they should respect their own needs?
Yeah.
If within this room we are not respecting our own needs. So yeah, I do have a sort of a feeling like that, but then on the other hand, I think I learned, because I had a pretty wild training in Serbia, that this for me is like, you know, a spa.
Oh, I see. I'm always fascinated by that, Alexandra, when people who trained in other places where it's a bit more Wild West, and I think it probably has more of the spirit of the 60s than my London experience. You know, when I met someone who I think was started at, I can't really remember the story, but certainly there was the expectation in the first part of their course, I think it was maybe Canada or something, first part of the course, that they all turn up naked on the first day, and then they get undressed day one, and they sit there naked and they deal with that. And I'm thinking, okay, well, that didn't happen in London, that's for sure. So yeah, I mean, you know, those early field conditions have a huge effect on permission and wildness and
Yes.
I think one of the dilemmas is that in some ways Gestalt has got compared to it was started by a maverick. It was started by left fielders and mavericks, you know, none more militant and different and transgressive than people like Paul Goodman and Fritz Perls, and they are still emblematic of, if you bore me, I will yawn. And if I want to sit upside down on this chair, I will. And if I want to go for a pee, I will. And if I want to sleep, I will. And that, I think that counter-revolution of the 70s and 80s, where that was barbaric, that's totally inappropriate and disrespectful. You know, if you read like Yontef, that boom, boom, boom stuff was, you know, you can't be doing that stuff. That's not how therapy works. And yet that has an enormous appeal to many of us who have a quite a coded life. Okay, well, what if I want to sit in my underpants? You know, what if I want to have some MDMA before the session? And all that, you know, how wild is wild and how real is real?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I guess for me, this whole process is learning how to use structure as a support. Which I guess there is part of my historical field that there was no structure. Therefore, sometimes that is also a great thing to have. But then on the other hand, exactly what you're saying is how do we actually explore ourselves within things that are not societally accepted or normalized. I think
go on.
I think for
and
me,
dare one risk the backlash if it doesn't work? You know, if you say, okay, do you want an hour and a half of people coming at you because of what you said? Because it's risky, but is it not allowed? I mean, we live in a very different culture to the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, where there's more sensitivity around what comments mean and where power lies. In particularly as a white, straight male in my mid-50s. I find myself going through a process, which in some senses is entirely right, of I can imagine someone else saying this, but I don't think I should say this.
Yeah.
I can imagine someone taking that risk, but that should be the white middle-aged guy.
Actually, this is the next question. I was curious about this. So how do you experience yourself in your gender and in your age?
Oh, these are fabulous questions. I wish I had much better answers. I'm really alive to both of those things, I think. What do I want to say about them? Yeah, I'm aware in ways which I don't think is usually associated with white, straight, middle-aged guys, I suspect, of historically, politically, economically, socially, what that means. And I guess I have, because I live with someone who calls himself a staunch feminist, and I've become one as well. I'm very militant. I'm a militant feminist, if that's all right to say. And I am sensitive and interested in, okay, what people who have historically held power do with that power now. Even if I guess my new learning on this in the last 3 years, even if you can't see it, feel it, touch it, and even if you are not privileged in other ways, gender and race are there on the table massively, but you can't smell it. And I kind of have an operating, maybe it's a value, I'm not sure, but it's an operating principle for me of how I am, I can't control. That gender thing of, you know, it's the bloke again. So when I find myself expounding and explaining, I think, oh yeah, I've moved into that I know field. And I think maybe if you moved into that field, that might be received differently as a Serbian woman. Oh yeah, she's really clever. Wow, she knows her stuff. Compared to me, because I might be associated with a historical past of huge weight and significance. So I notice it, and I'm probably getting better at noticing it. What to do with it, I'm not entirely sure, because I guess we're in a historical phase where we are finding out what it means. We're finding out what inclusivity means. We're discovering what difference means in conversation, in every room, in every therapeutic relationship. I don't have any answers about it. I do want to tread carefully, and I do want to understand. I do want to assume that because I can't see it, it's almost certainly there. Race, I think, similarly, I think mostly, at least in the UK, therapy is a very white world. It's a very middle class world. And what I've noticed is diversity inclusivity is often, we better do that now. So we're all on, we're going to the conference. Oh, it's the inclusivity bit because someone, a black therapist from Scotland has said, or someone in a wheelchair over there has talked about diversity. All right, so it's that bit now. So let's all do that. And it'll be very uncomfortable for me and for others. And then we can put that aside and get on with the normal stuff. So it doesn't feel to me integrated as a field condition. It feels like a prickly bush in the field of not sure what to do with it. And if I were being very honest with you, I feel vulnerable in those conversations because I'm not sure what I should say. I'm not sure if I can be heard. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to contribute or what, I'm allowed to take up space for my diversity, whatever that might be, as a very poor working class boy from Margate and looking in the window of Marks and Spencer's and thinking that is a different world. So, my mother dragging me past Marks and Spencer's and saying, that's not for the likes of us. We don't go in there because it was a class privilege that we didn't belong to. So, like most people, I'm trying to have a good heart about it. I'm trying to be authentic and real about it. I'm trying to take some risks. But I guess I'm the same as everyone else on the planet. We're just trying to make sense of who we are together and what's respectful and what's permitted and what's an invasion and what deserves a slap and what statues ought to be brought down and what needs to be included and recognized or cancelled out. We're all in that environment. I'm just one part of that field trying to make sense of it. And I'm a white, straight, middle class guy trying to do that.
Yeah. And I'm curious, what did the conversations, for example, with the person you live with about femininity and womanhood how did they shape your thinking about masculinity and manhood, and did that in any way impact you to actually reconsider your own views of what is for you masculinity?
Oh God, yeah. So on my first day of my training for the masters, the year was 2000, introduce yourself and say what you're looking for. And I said, I'm Sean, I want to learn how to be a man. It was day one. It was a big #1 topic for me. Didn't really have role models. I had an orientation towards charismatic broken men, who I regarded as broken father figures for me to lift up and nurture or look after or be looked after by. So what Sean as a...
I just find it very interesting that that not only women have orientation towards...
Oh, no. If you were a broken charismatic man, I would be knocking on your door. Absolutely, yeah. Let's go out for a drink and let me help you home when you get too drunk, because that feels how the world is made a little bit. And then I kind of experimented with becoming a charismatic kind of drunk man in my early 20s and found that wasn't me, thankfully. But that corresponded that year when I said that with meeting my partner, and we've worked out together really about what's a man supposed to be, because I have a very definite idea of what a man is supposed to be, and it's made up of strange parts of the fabric. There's a part of the fabric which is very traditional. I don't mean by that I pay for the food or anything like that. Not like is that there's a programming there which I depart from occasionally and live up to of be strong for others. Yeah. But that doesn't mean don't be vulnerable. It means find some solutions, but also admit your ignorance. And so that the version of manhood that I've got nowadays is partly quite a new age. I do all the laundry in my house. I do quite a lot of the conversations on feelings. So it's inverted what's a so-called traditional structure. But I'm also the guy that does the DIY. And I'm also the guy that opens the doors. And I'm also the guy that's going to sort out the TV because the aerials come out. So there's a whole, I think for me and for her, a very satisfactory mixture of one is not better than the other. And I suppose the amazing thing that we've worked out unconsciously is we will adopt positions of superiority and strength and ability and competence, irrespective and across those traditional divides. Mm-hmm. So, you know, she pays for the bills when we go out for a meal because I'm quite mean, and she earns more than I do. So, you know, she will take me out on a date after 20 years, and she'll pay and won't tell me because I get annoyed about how much it's cost. So there'll be all these kinds of mixed things. But we often say jokingly, you know, you're the girl, you need to do this, or you're the boy, you need to do that. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, you know, she has a national profile as a chief executive of a charity, and has been mentioned in the Daily Mail several times negatively for her very pro-feminist views and so on. So, you know, we have you know, various clippings of her in newspapers being a feminist on a platform. So has it informed? Yeah, I feel that I've been educated in the best possible way, but I was also on a journey myself about what is this thing called being a man? I'm not, you know, if you were asking me in 1955, I would have been very clear. But I think it's up for grabs, and it's a very movable and interesting domain now. Okay, being a man seems to be do what I do. Okay, you know, do the ironing and do the laundry and be strong and lift heavy things, but cry and be sentimental and support and do other things as well. And actually, those historical restrictions, probably other than lifting heavy things, are utterly meaningless. It's, you know, we can fluidly go in and out of the stereotypes and be creative with those stereotypes. I'll pick up the money for this date, I'll open this door, or whatever it might be. And you can be fluid and joyous as you discover and straddle stereotypes versus your own creation. I find myself very happy in what I consider my gender. My race, I think I'm still working out, because I think if it's cross-sectioned with class, I think that becomes, I consider myself poor and alien and unseen because of class. I think some of those things correspond with how some people of color feel how they're treated by some white people. So that's still a process for me to work out, and I feel excited about working it out.
Mm-hmm. I also find it very nice in our conversation that you several times mentioned beauty and beautiful and things that I wouldn't stereotypically expect from a man. So I was very
yeah. I also love soft fabrics and cushions, and so all that's true too.
Yeah. Yeah, so I actually find it very liberating to just hear your authentic expression and that mixture of everything, basically. And so we mentioned this a little bit, but how do you experience privilege and power? And how would you maybe define or redefine power in different contexts? Can it be positive as well?
Whew. Oh, these are like exam questions. They're so big and deep. I feel like I need to make notes. I don't know, to be honest. I don't have a definition. I don't even know where my, you know, I think I know what my power is. I'm not sure where it ends and begins or where it's useful. I feel powerful, and then sometimes immediately after I feel powerless within the same 5 minutes. I don't know. I think if I was really digging deep, I'd say I don't know. I don't know enough about power. I'm not sure I know what mine is. I know I feel comfortable with it, but quite what its contours are, I don't know. And that's a yeah. You've opened up a little field of development for me, because I don't know. I love feeling powerful, but I find it intoxicating. And I think that's a therapeutic thing I'm talking about there. It's very easy to be the wise guru and do the powerful thing and the insights and the knowledge and all that stuff. And I find that compelling.
So I lost the last word. I find that compelling and
dangerous. What the nature of power in a therapeutic relationship. I mean, I know of one therapist who used to be a friend, who would say something like this: all this nonsense the therapist has all the power. The client could get up and go at any time. And I thought, this is interesting because, okay, you're an Asian man, but you live in a house that's worth £2 million. That's where your consulting room is. And people come into a millionaire's house, and then they go into a room with antiques. And there's a crystal goblet, and there's a beautiful shades. And you're saying there's no power involved in that. There's loads of power in that. So sometimes I feel like I don't see it. Sometimes it's really obvious. Sometimes it feels like I'm powerless and the client's got it. Sometimes I feel like I'm imposing and I deserve a step back because I'm taking too much space. But quite frankly, I don't really know. I certainly don't have a definition for you that's going to be in the dictionary of quotations. But I feel that I feel like I want to ponder that. I feel that's an interesting question for me.
And so I would like to go a little bit into Gestalt therapy and your connection to Gestalt. And so you mentioned a little bit how you got into it, but maybe if you want to add something and to say something about what is it that it attracted you to Gestalt specifically?
Yeah, I'll try. You've frozen for me, but can you still hear me?
Now, yeah, you defrosted a bit.
Okay, I thought, good, excellent. I think I can talk fairly lucidly about that. So those points that I just told you about, where I realized that I could listen and maybe have some insight. So I picked up the Incomprehensible Bible, Pearl's Hefferline Goodman. I tried to make sense of that and chew that. And I guess one of the things, and I guess this is common, is that Gestalt felt exciting. It felt exciting. It felt rich. It felt energized in a way that possibly I say than the subjects itself, but there's something about person-centered that felt a bit not quite passive. That would be really unfair, but overly receptive without putting some of Sean there. And I guess I have a sufficient ego to want to be in it, and I want to say something about me, and I want to give my insight. And I think Gestalt gave a certain permission to bring a fullness of who you might be and be becoming in a way that I didn't feel that the others were happy about. That could be my misunderstanding, and maybe that's different now to what it was in the 90s when I started thinking about it. So there was that sense of, okay, there's room for me. The second thing was I found quite a lot of the orientations so speculative. I'm talking about Freud and Jung specifically here. That, and having read a little bit about the history of Freud's and Freudians and neo-Freudians, how much it resembled a faith of some of Freud's disciples and Freud's rejection of Jung and others as not following the path of sexual repression and phases of sexuality and the oral phase. And if you didn't subscribe to that and went elsewhere on a tangent, then you were kind of out. You were persona non grata. And so I thought, a lot of it seemed to be very speculative, metaphysical. And I thought, the part of me that likes to know how things work is not satisfied here as a theoretical position. It's worked out, but it feels quite alchemical. It feels like iron into gold here. I'm not sure if I buy some of these concepts, and I'm supposed to buy them, not test them, research them or evidence them, but buy them. So that felt a bit uncomfortable. And I guess there's something about Gestalt, which I've always regarded, and perhaps a little bit blasphemously, as a collection of positions. It doesn't feel theoretically coherent for me, and never really has. People point towards the bit in Pearl's Hefferline and Goodman, where Goodman, in very poetic terms, describes middle mode or selfing or something like that. And I think, well, okay, it's like reading Blake, William Blake's poetry. It's metaphysical, it's undeniable, but it's also unfalsifiable. You know, it feels like, okay, polarities, love it. Field theory, that sounds interesting. Sub-integrated parts or disintegrated parts, disintegrated and put in a chair and spoken to and acted out, the psychodramatic aspect. Oh, that's quite nice. And oh, there's a bit over there. And quantum theory and field. And so it feels like a patchwork quilt of positions and ideas and borrowings. And I'm happy about that. I don't, you know, as Jontev said in the 80s and 90s, you know, the concept of self is not really worked out in Gestalt literature, and Gestalt research is negligible compared to you know, famously CBT and stuff. But I don't mind that. I don't mind having a bag of positions and understandings and insights, a bit of Buddhism, a bit of field theory, a bit of polarity, a bit of this, and a bit of that. And let's borrow from psychodrama and internal family systems. And I'm very happy with that, by implication, integrated approach. But there's something about Gestalt, I guess the number one factor that attracted me to it, and I assume it's the same for most people, is that it gave you permission to be wrong and to be foolish and to try something out. Shit, that doesn't work. Okay, what about that? Okay, what about over here? There, oh, something's happened. And it just gave you that childlike discovery process, rather than your mother hated you and your father rejected you when you were 3. That kind of, dare I say, quite male puncturing the butterfly. It's a bit like Lepidoptera. It's like, oh, there's something beautiful, say your favorite word, that's something beautiful and exquisite and ephemeral dancing in the garden. Let's pin it now and label it in Latin. And that will be a joy for nobody other than the part of me that wants to categorize and stuff like that. So there's something about Gestalt which felt like keep the
So I lost you for a moment when you said there's something about Gestalt that feels like, and then it was stopped.
Childlike.
Yeah.
Childlike discovery, I guess I was saying, about, okay, well, let the butterfly flutter and see what happens, rather than...
Yeah,
I've solved you.
Yeah, this is, as a scientist, this is very satisfying answer, because I would say I always hated the English way of being, but it's a very bad thing to say, because it's always felt like a collection that we can put in a museum and trap them so that we can somehow, exactly. And it was kind of never my way of experiencing life, but then and actually a lot of let's dissect, let's cut down, let's open. And although I am a scientist that does that, there is some interest in that as well, and it is important. But I do agree that having the polarity and being aware of it, and not having this polarity dominate everything, is really important. So
I think you've expressed that much better than me, Alexandra. I think it's exactly that, of to resist. I mean, you need diagnoses, you need perceptions, you need DSM-5, you need all that stuff. But if that's all that the world is, of every butterfly exists next to the beetle that belongs to its genus and family, something is very wrong with life.
Yeah.
And I think you're right, it's quite an Anglo-Saxon, I think ironically, quite Aristotelian.
Yeah.
It's let's categorize, let's have taxonomies, let's have subsections. And I suppose a bit like William Blake, who said something like, he who kisses the joy as it flies lives in eternity's sunrise. And I guess that's the polarity for me, of just enough rigidity or Anglo-Saxonness to have a centeredness, but I want to watch that butterfly flutter. I don't want to pin it.
Yeah.
And to answer your question, that's why I'm in Gestalt rather than something else.
Yeah. So I will have note of time. So although we have maybe 2 or 3 more questions, I think I will choose only one to finish with, and which is, what are the greatest memories you have that are connected to Gestalt?
Whew. Okay, well, my memory is deciding that answer for me, actually. I was trying to formulate something with my left brain, but my right brain is associated very, very quickly. And it was in a residential, probably my 3rd year of training. And the sun was shining, and it was February, and we were in Bournemouth in Dorset. And my year went out for a walk. And we were walking along the promenade with this beautiful, crisp, clean February, January day. And I felt, yeah, I belong here. I belong here with these kind of people. This is it. And although that was also a butterfly that flied, and we kind of split up after that year, there was something that felt like, oh yeah, I've got that thing I was looking for, which was to feel connected.
I would say this is a very nice note to finish this conversation on. So I want to really thank you for your openness and for your time.
Oh, my pleasure. I've really enjoyed, I wouldn't say talking to you because I haven't listened enough. Maybe I will return the favor and interview you one day, but I've really enjoyed the opportunity to think and make sense of stuff. Thank you so much.
I mean, to be honest, I am completely up for the experiment. So if you ever feel like,
let's talk after. Yeah.
Okay, I'll